The King of Clients, Episode 11, The Moral Reckoning, A Call to Conscience. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. That is the bedrock promise of American life. It is the hope that sustains every witness, every victim, and every citizen who looks at the broken system and says, "Not here, not anymore." I'm your host, Ryan Johnson, and this is the final episode of The King of Clients. Over the past 10 episodes, we have not just audited a crime. We have audited the institutions that protected it. We have traced the corruption not just back to a single billionaire, but across 30 years of deliberate, calculated, systemic failure. We have seen that the system was not broken by neglect, it was weaponized by design. The time for quiet disappointment is over. The time for moral reckoning is here. We now synthesize the full measure of the betrayal. In 1996, the system was given its first warning. In 2008, the system was given a clear mandate to prosecute. In 2019, it was given a second chance to pursue justice. At every pivot point, the institutions of power, the Department of Justice, the courts, and political leadership chose to protect the powerful instead of the vulnerable. That is the sin of delayed justice. As Dr. King wrote from a Birmingham jail, justice too long delayed is justice denied. For 3 decades, justice was denied to Maria, to Jane Doe number 1, to every single victim whose testimony was suppressed by a secret agreement designed to sell immunity to the architects of abuse. We found that the Non-Prosecution Agreement was not an anomaly. It was the mechanism of the cover-up. It was the moment when law and order decoupled itself from justice, choosing the negative piece of maintaining the powerful order over the positive piece of establishing fairness and accountability. The failure was total because the motive was foundational. The establishment, the elite, coordinated their efforts to ensure access to the abuse and to eliminate the legal risk. They were protecting their product and their power. We are now confronted with what Dr. King called the fierce urgency of now. This is no time for apathy or complacency. This is the moment where silence becomes betrayal. The corruption we have uncovered, the immunity deals, the hidden settlement documents, the political backscratching, all point to the same moral failing. When the law itself is used to obstruct justice, the law becomes, in Dr. King's words, the dangerously structured dams that block the flow of social progress. our institutions, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the judicial complex, were designed to protect the integrity of the law. Instead, they became the greatest threat to it. They built walls of legal process and privilege to shield their collaborators, creating a separate set of rules for the ultra-rich, guaranteeing that their crimes would remain non-punishable. We must be clear. The ultimate measure of a society is not found in moments of comfort and convenience, but in where it stands at times of challenge and controversy. When the most vulnerable children are sacrificed to protect the most powerful men, our entire society is weighed and found wanting. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Many people have asked, and they ask rightly, if the law is only as good as the people who enforce it, and if our society is so morally hollow that we produce men like Acosta who will sell justice for political peace, then what good are more laws? What good is more bureaucracy? The roots of this problem are in education, in culture, and in a crisis of conscience. But we must remember this. Societal change is the long arc, but structural reform is the hinge of history. We cannot wait for every person to suddenly become moral. We must, in the immediate term, tear down the legal and financial architecture of impunity. When a man like Acosta decides to corrupt the law, he relies on a legal mechanism, the NPA, the secrecy, the lack of oversight. Structural checks do not fix the human heart. They simply ensure that the corrupt heart can never again use the law as its shield. We are building a system that forces the powerful to submit to the same moral standards the rest of us are judged by. We are dismantling the structural dams that block the flow of justice, so that when the moral education finally takes root, the system will be ready to protect it. We have done the audit. We have exposed the rot. Now we move to the final demand, the restructuring necessary to make justice inevitable. Since people first formed governments, we have demanded judicial checks and independent bureaus. But let us confront a deeper, more essential truth. The most perfect law is useless if the people tasked with enforcing it lack the courage to act, or if the citizens lack the will to demand it. We do not need a new law to know right from wrong. That knowledge is written on the human heart. The failure of this system was a failure of moral imagination, a collective spiritual collapse where thousands of people, from prosecutors to clerks to neighbors, chose silence. Think of the bystander effect. not just as a failure of individuals in a dark alley, but as a metaphor for a society that watched as children were victimized. When dozens of people stand silent while a crime occurs, the problem is not a lack of rules. The problem is a surrender of conscience. Evil flourishes only when it can rely on the curtain of indifference. Our greatest power is not found in proposing a new pillar of legislation. It is found in the irresistible call of a moral life and the simple, undeniable refusal to participate in the lie. The system did work when the people forced it to. When citizens called their legislators, the movement to release the Epstein files began. That is the proof that the power resides in the active, engaged conscience of the people. We demand that the nation turn from apathy to action through 4 essential pillars of conscience, which require nothing more than simple human decency. Number 1, the pillar of refusal. We must refuse to accept the lie of elite impunity. We must refuse to be silent witnesses. We must refuse the culture that teaches our children that only the rich and powerful are worth listening to. We must teach them, first and foremost, the dignity of their own moral judgment. Number 2, the pillar of active citizenship. Justice is not a spectator sport. It is the practice of relentless, small actions. It is calling your legislator. It is demanding transparency from your local officials. It is showing up. The fight for justice is never lost to the forces of evil, but by the belief that someone else will handle it. We cannot fail if we all do the small things we can. Number 3, the pillar of moral education. The long arc of justice is built on the foundation of character. We must prioritize teaching our children the instinct of right over the calculation of convenience. The greatest protection we can give them is the wisdom to see the powerful men who enable this abuse for what they are and the courage to run the other way. Number 4, the pillar of accountability for all. We must treat every person in power, from the lowest clerk to the highest prosecutor, not with deference, but with the expectation of virtue. We must bring the light of truth behind the curtain of privilege, ensuring that every person who fails in their duty is met not with a bureaucratic slap on the wrist, but with the total, public, and immediate professional consequence. To the survivors who stood up 30 years ago, who spoke in courtrooms, and who have listened to this entire series, you took the first step in faith, even when you could not see the whole staircase. To every citizen who has been disillusioned by the system, we must learn that passively to accept an unjust system is to cooperate with that system, and thereby to become a participant in its evil. We must be the creatively maladjusted citizens who refuse to tolerate the status quo. The arc of the moral universe does not bend by itself. It bends because we seize the tools of justice and apply the nonviolent pressure of truth and action. The time is always right to do what is right. We have the truth, we have the motive, we have the conscience. Let the final struggle begin.